All right, joining me now is former Chief of Staff to President Trump, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, good to see you. It's fascinating to watch this breakout. Right in Wisconsin, you're seeing this happen with regard to Ron Johnson running on crime and inflation. Mandela Barnes, his Democrat challenger, running on abortion. I'm sure abortion, you're probably seeing that in North Carolina. But we're seeing this across the country. How do you think these messages, crime with Republicans, abortion with Democrats, plays out?
Yeah, well, hey, Sean, it's the economy, stupid, right? I mean, that's always what it's all about. Bill Clinton knew that 25 years ago, and I think the Democrats and Republicans are relearning it right now. You know, it's easy to say what's important to you. Maybe you vote on abortion, maybe you don't. By the way, I think Republicans are actually more motivated by abortion than Democrats, and there's actually data to back that up. But at the end of the day, what touches everybody is not abortion, it's not Ukraine, it's not even the border. What touches everybody is prices, inflation. And what you're seeing is that the economy is driving this and crime is driving this, especially in Wisconsin, where places where they've had some difficulties in the recent past. That touches everybody. And that's why the Republicans are starting to sort of move in the right direction. You're feeling that momentum, Sean. You've been down this, half a dozen times with me. You sort of feel that momentum as we get into the last 3 or 4 weeks, that things are moving the Republicans' way.
You know, I think it's a good point. You look at the trend lines, and Republicans keep gaining ground. They've done that over probably the last 5-6 weeks. Now, OPEC Plus just cut $2 million barrels a day of production. We're seeing oil prices rise, right? And we're talking about the economy, the Mammoth poll that was referenced. You know, 61% of independent voters are saying, listen, the economy is the #1 issue for me. I have to imagine that trend line continues as voters consider the economy and their finances going into November 8th.
It does. And I think importantly, I think independent voters, I think a lot of voters are willing to accept the basic premise that spending in Washington is contributing to inflation. And if you spend less, you'll get less inflation. Most Democrat lawmakers are refusing to admit that. You press a Democrat candidate, you press a Democrat House or a senator, and they'll tell you that what's really causing higher prices is corporate greed. Voters aren't buying that. Voters know that under Donald Trump, we had full employment, we had growth, we had deficits, but we had no inflation. Now you're sitting here with this massive spending on the Democrats, and people are starting to see inflation. So I think common sense voters, those folks right down the middle who make up their minds in the last couple of weeks, who often tip elections one way or the other, are looking their hand over and saying, I'd like to see the Republicans in charge of the House and maybe even the Senate as well.
You know, a lot of times when we look at races, we look at them in silos, but we know that's not how campaigns work, right? It matters who else is on the ballot with you and how well they're doing. And I think it's interesting in Georgia, Governor Kemp is doing really well. In Arizona, Kerry Lake, running for governor, is doing very well. I have to imagine that's going to give some lift to the Senate candidates running in those two states, both controlled by Democrats. That could be one of the factors that tips the Senate in the Republican direction.
It could be. It also raises some real good questions as to why Herschel Walker, for example, is not doing as well as the governor. Obviously, there's some value to the benefits of the incumbency and so forth. But if you look at Georgia, what you realize is it's a red state. It just is. Republicans should do very well. And on a coin toss, they should probably win, and that's where it looks like it's going. Arizona, the same way. We should be doing better there. But the good news is it looks like Donald Trump is engaging. You and I both know how important enthusiasm is, how get out the vote is important in these last couple of weeks, especially with early voting. And with Trump engaging, maybe he motivates those folks in Georgia and in Arizona, in Nevada, to come out and vote, who otherwise might have stayed home and not voted for the Republican.
You know, you and I follow House races because we were House guys, but you think about the Senate, and they were kind of the enemy of the House sometimes. We saw that. But we think about the power of the Senate that advises and gives consent to the president. So you look at judicial nominations, you look at cabinet appointments. The Senate has to approve those nominations. Winning the Senate is incredibly important as you look to the role they play with regard to the president, right?
It is. It's a check and balance, right? You don't get a full sort of liberal progressive administrative branch if you have Republicans in charge of the Senate. Also, you're not going to get that full-blown left-wing progressive judge bench, the bench of judges with Republicans in charge of the Senate. You move things sort of more towards the center. So you get that balance between the two parties that is lost under one-party rule. So I think, you know, again, do independent voters care about that? Do they care about judges? I don't know. Probably not. I keep circling back to this place we started, Sean, which is It's about the economy, and if people think that the Republicans are better for their pocketbook, they're voting Republican.
No, I agree that voters don't really care, but the important point is that it really does matter, right? It does matter who controls the Senate. Listen, I want to ask you about the House. Now, in the Fox Power ranking polls, it shows that Republicans, if that poll was accurate, would have a 14-seat majority. Now, is that a governable majority? Sometimes you have people in the Congress who are Republicans that say, you know what, this isn't conservative enough, or you've gone in the wrong direction, and they bail off, the Republican train to pass legislation or push back against an administration. If Kevin McCarthy is a speaker and he has a 14-seat majority, is that enough to make sure he can do what he needs to push back against Joe Biden?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's certainly more than Nancy's had. Pelosi's had, a margin of 6 or 7, and she's managed to get her agenda through. By the way, you mentioned earlier those OPEC cuts. I've seen some numbers, Sean. I was with Frank Luntz overseas the last couple of days that a 25-cent increase in the price of gas between now and Election Day could mean another 5 or 6 House seats and maybe another Senate seat. So there's a lot of things that can change between now and Election Day. But yeah, 230 is a good number. You and I were there with 250. It just depends on the issue.
Better. The
good news. The good news is that as long as we're not fighting amongst ourselves as we go into the election, that's what we need. That's the message we need to send to people is put us in charge and we can run the country from the House, from the Senate. And I think that's the message that Republicans are sending out right now. We've reduced the amount of infighting, which is always good.
Mick, it's a team sport. You all got to work together and stand together and fight together. Because when you get people bailing, it doesn't work so well. I only have 30 seconds left. I want to have you take a look at this clip from Tulsi Gabbard, who came out just today and was talking about a change in her political alliance. Take a look.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party. It's now under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms enshrined in our Constitution, and who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police, who protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans.
Mick Mulvaney, I don't know that you could have said it any better than Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, you and I both know Tulsi real well. She's an extraordinarily sharp, bright woman. I don't think she's going to become a Republican. I just think there's things in our party right now that she won't be able to buy into. But if anybody can sort of chart a middle way, it's going to be her. She's a very talented woman. We'll be curious to see what she does next.
100%. Mick Mulvaney, always smart. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.